Yeah, we were talking the other day about how the cap went up unexpectedly by $13 million. And I was curious what you thought about that.
Yeah, well, the first thing I thought of was, oh, this is great for the Vikings. But then I thought about it a bit more, and I'm like, well, it's actually great for everybody. If you're way over the cap, well, it gives you a little bit extra breathing room. If you're under the cap, it gives you even more breathing room. And it's really no advantage to everybody. It did make me wonder, does this mean that the price for particularly Kirk Cousins goes up now? Because if he was if he was looking for 45 million guaranteed for 2 or 3 years pre a $30 million increase in the salary cap, well, every player wants to get a bit more of that pie. So does suddenly the price become 47 million or 48 million now? And then, so that was one thing that it made me think about. And the other thing was just looking at the Vikings cap space right now, and that I think they've got the 13th best cap space right now in the league. Of course, problem being that two other teams in our division are even in better position. The Lions are 7th and the Bears are 3rd, but 13th is a lot better than we've seen in the past 3 or 4 years. And
we got to this time of year and we're like 20 or 30 million over and we're trying to get underneath.
Mm-hmm. Who are we going to have to cut to actually be able to do something in free agency? So you can complain about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's free agent signings. You can complain about his drafts, his first 2 drafts, but I think you can look at what he's done with the finances of the Vikings and say he's got their financial house in order, and he's done it in 2 seasons.
Okay. I see we are alive. I want to welcome everybody to 2 Bloggers, where you have the 2 of us, me, Dave, and Darren right over there. We are bloggers originally, started way back in the mid-2000s, and we've talked your Minnesota Vikings publicly for over 2 decades apiece. And today we have a all-encompassing theme. You'll hear Kwesi throughout the show. And we said on this, is his seat getting hot? Is it starting to? Well, there's an answer to that, and we'll get to that during the show. But it's interesting to see all the interactions we've had so far, and there's a bunch of you out there, and boy, do we love seeing you. From Papa to David to SKOL Mafia. Yeah, Dave, I'm hoping you're not up in a bucket or on a tree somewhere. Ant's here. Reggie has made it all way to show up, hey, Reg. Hope you're barbecuing something. And Raymond and Doc and Norspheus and all the gang is here. So let's get started. We got 3 themes as usual. We'll get into them right after the roll-in. Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikingsland with Darren and Dave, your 2 Bloggers. How about now? Can everybody hear us now? Anybody? Give me a 5x5. I can't hear you. Say something, Darren. I can't hear you for some reason. Here we go. Now I should be able to hear you. Do we get sound? Is the sound fixed?
Am I audible?
I can hear you. Everybody. All right. Well, shit. Sometimes we have that sort of deal. Why it started off in the mute mode, I have no idea. That is strange. I apologize, people. We were talking about, to start the show, we were talking about the salary cap. Did you all catch that? So, interesting. All right, everybody can hear us both now. All right, thank you. Good. YouTube and technical difficulties aside, that's not good. Well, we talked about, to open the show, how the salary cap went up by $13 million and what it might mean, but it's Kwesi gets to a little bit more money and gets the fiscal house in order, and we're not going into free agency now with having to make up 20 or 30 million in the hole just to play, just to get under the cap. So it's a good thing. So, all right, let's go. Theme 1. So I switch my menus here. We're going to This Week in Vikingsland.
This is our third segment of third time we've run this segment for the kind of a new segments for us, and kind of looking at a grab bag of stuff, kind of like the old quick hitters, only we're doing it on a regular basis now. And the first one we're going to get to is Marcus Davenport. Talked about him several times on the show the last few weeks. What we learned this week was that his contract was going to be void on Monday. He was going to be a free agent. I thought that the Vikings had no interest in retaining him, and we're going to allow that void date to come and go and wave goodbye to Marcus. Then we found out that they have extended it to March the 13th, beginning of free agency period, basically. And that one surprised me, Dave, and for a couple of reasons. Because, again, I thought he was a goner. Because he didn't get on the field at all this year. He played 4 games, a few snaps in 2 of them, and 2 full games. A good player when he plays, but doesn't play very much. He's never played a full season in the NFL, and last year we paid him $13 million to play 2 full games and bit parts in 2 others. And what was worse was that it's not just the consistent injuries, but then there were reports. Doogie Wolfson came out with this back in December, I think, saying that Davenport looked healthy enough to play. He was walking around, seemed to be looking fine, but that there was questions of whether he wanted to play. Mm-hmm. And so that is never a good sign. If Marcus Davenport was dogging it, getting back into the lineup and being able to dress while the Vikings were fighting for a playoff position and could have really used him on the field, that's not a good look in the locker room. And that would make me wonder, what do the Vikings players, take Harrison Smith, for instance, who had a banged up shoulder at the end of the year, kept on playing, suiting up. And, there's a lot more guys just like him that with the Vikings who were still hurt, but were still going out there and playing. They're not going to, I think, take too kindly to a teammate, especially a guy who was new like Davenport, coming in and taking his sweet old time and saying, "Nah, I'm good. I'm not going to play."
Yeah. So a total of 100, and I know that's hard to see, but 118 snaps, I think it was, he played. Mm-hmm. And you can see the colors. You guys know PFF's colors by now. The darker the blue, green, the better, and not when you can only do 4 games.
No, exactly. So I didn't feel like there'd be any chance that he came back with the Vikings. I still think that's the case. But the fact that that Davenport's team and the Vikings agreed to extend it a few days and see if they can find some common ground shows that maybe that those that whole thing about Davenport not being ready to play, but not being willing to play late in the season may have been just bullshit and not true. Because if you're the Vikings, why do you even want to consider this if you've got a guy who doesn't have the will and to play when he can play? That's just not a guy you want on your team. So interesting times. And I think that the thing about this is that not only when you look at the Vikings, and we're going to get into this later, is that on the edge, on outside linebacker right now, we don't really have a whole lot under contract. So for the Vikings, maybe they're thinking Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is looking at the outside linebacker position, looking at how free agency is lining up and thinking, well, I want to keep my options open and at least explore the possibility of Marcus Davenport coming back, particularly if those reports from Doogie Wilson and that filtered down to a few others about him dogging it, getting back, are not true. So an interesting development, I think. Dalvin Tomlinson went through the same thing last year. We didn't end up re-signing him. He signed a bigger deal with Cleveland. I expect that Davenport will be playing somewhere else in 2024 and not Minnesota, but at least there's a possibility that he could be coming back, which I thought was zero chance of that happening even a week ago.
It's going to be interesting. We'll get more into him when we talk outside linebackers and the third and final theme when we review that position. But they extended it, and it gives the front office maximum flexibility up until the new league year starts on the 13th at 3 o'clock Central. They have up until that time to get him under an extension if they want to keep him. Otherwise, his dead cap rolls into the year, which, if I remember correctly, he's around $8 million or $6 million or something like that is what his dead cap was from last year. He got paid $13 million, a little over $13 million last year, and they just split the payment cap-wise for last year and this year. So, and the idea of, hey, have him come in, it's a good chance that he's good when he plays. And all he had to do was stay healthy. Well, we found out,
unable to do that.
Yeah, and generally, if he's got the slightest boo-boo, he's one of those players that we hear about that has to be 100%, and that just doesn't hack it. Most people have to go to work every day, and unless you're close to deathbed or have something highly contagious, most employers say, no, get your butt in here. That's the way it goes. That's the real world, as we like to say.
Yes.
So it's going to be interesting to see. Next to this is Theo Jackson.
Yes. This week, the Vikings signed their first free agent of the offseason, and that was this guy, Theo Jackson, the safety. He was an exclusive rights free agent, so really not a free agent. We basically all we had to do was offer him something, and he pretty much had to take that deal. And we did, getting him for 1 year, $985,000. And he's a guy, Theo Jackson, who played 125 defensive snaps last year. So yay, we signed him. No big deal. Well, not so fast, my friends, as Lee Corso likes to say on the college show. Because I think that Theo Jackson, even though 125 defensive snaps is not a lot, but if Harrison Hitman Smith is not back this year, either he retires or he is released to provide the Vikings with some salary cap relief. Both of us, Dave, believe it's going to be one or the other. Mm-hmm. If he is not back next year, I think that Theo Jackson is your number 3 safety. I don't think that the Vikings would sign another veteran free agent safety, even if they lost Harrison Smith, right, because I think that Theo Jackson would be your number 3 safety, and that is significant in the Brian Flores defense because obviously Cam Bynum and Josh Metellus are going to play almost 100% of the defensive snaps if Harrison Smith is out. But Brian Flores ran a lot of 3 safety looks last year, and that's why Metellus, Hitman, and Bynum are on the field so much on defense. And if Hitman is gone from that equation, I think Theo Jackson becomes your number 3 safety, and I'm okay with that. I like what I saw from him when he played, and we already know that he's clearly ahead of Lewis Cine on the depth chart. Even Jay Ward is ahead of Lewis Cine on the depth chart at this point. So
hey, he's gotten some decent grades so far.
Yeah,
he's not terrible.
He's not, well, yeah. And again, he's 26. He's cheap. I think that he's a guy that could, what you signed him for and what he could give you on the field, it could be great value for money by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah in making this signing. On the surface, it doesn't look like such a big deal, but if Jackson ends up playing major snaps, then it becomes a great signing and a very important signing for the Vikings defense in 2024.
Yeah, I think so too. There's quite the possibility. Ant tends to think, no, we can do better in the 8th round of the draft, or plenty of late round guys, he says.
Yeah, and I think that that's a possibility too. We'll get into safeties in a week or so, but certainly what we've seen the past couple of years is that the Vikings like to sign players who have played corner in the past but are now safeties and have that kind of positional flexibility. And I would certainly expect that. We know those types of players are often your core special teams guys as well, and you need those. So certainly not, I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings drafted another Jay Ward kind of guy who played corner at college, but also played safety in college and can do a bit of both, because Brian Flores seems to really like those players, those chess pieces in the defensive backfield.
I think you're 100% correct. All right, that brings us to the next sub-segment in Vikingsland. The title of this, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah on the hot seat.
Well, I guess what I mean by this is that I don't think he's in any
immediate
danger, but I don't think that there's a Vikings player, coach, or anyone in front office this year, right now in 2024, who is more on the line and is more on the hot seat than our general manager, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And I say that because just look at the offseason that we have facing us right now. The first thing, of course, Kirk Cousins, re-sign or not re-sign. This is the biggest decision the Vikings have in front of them right now. Biggest decision that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has in front of him right now. Do you re-sign him to a big money deal for a few years, or do you let him go in free agency and get somebody else? That is a decision at the most important position in sports altogether. That's going to have massive financial implications and massive implications for the Vikings on the field in 2024 and beyond that. So humongous decision facing Kwesi Adofo-Mensah right there. That's one. Just below that is Danielle Hunter, your edge rusher, coming off a career year in sacks. He's also going to turn 30 in late October, and that's an age where it gets a bit dicey whether you want to commit big dollars to re-signing a guy that age who's hitting free agency as Danielle Hunter is. Again, another decision that is going to have big implications financially to the Vikings and also on the field in 2024 and beyond. Not many teams face two major decisions like that in the same year, and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is staring that down right now over the next few weeks. And if that isn't enough, you've got the Justin Jefferson contract extension stuff, which we talked about like nonstop the past 2 weeks. Going to talk about it some more. How much are the Vikings going to re-sign him? How much and for how long? And if they don't, what are they going to do? Do they possibly trade this guy, your best player on your team? Seems unthinkable, but people are actually entertaining that.
Well, it's been all over Twitter today. There's steam, and that's the word they're using, that the Vikings are going to make it known that Justin Jefferson's available for trade. However, they may sign Kirk Cousins for a $50 million contract. That makes either of those make any sense whatsoever. Don't believe everything you read on the internet, people. It will help your sanity.
It will. But this is another one. Again, financially, big thing that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has to make a decision on, and on the field too. And it's already a storyline. It's already been talked about a number of times. Justin Jefferson keeps getting asked about it. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to keep getting asked about it, including this week at the Combine, and Kevin O'Connell too. And the longer it drags on, the longer it becomes a headache for Jefferson, for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and for the Vikings. So that thing is something that it will get resolved, but it's a big thing, a major thing that has to get resolved, and it's up to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to get it resolved. And then you top off those three big things. If that isn't enough, the fourth is just this draft in April in 2024. Vikings have the number 11th pick overall right now in the first round. That's the highest they've picked since 2015. Do they use that and other draft capital to trade up and finally make that move to consummate landing their quarterback of the future, something that we know the Vikings need, even if they keep Kirk Cousins? Or does Kwesi Adofo-Mensah not pull the trigger on trading up and maybe wait to pick one at 11, or not pick one at all in the first round or even the second round and gamble that 2025 is the year to get the quarterback of the future? Again, major implications there. Kwesi's first two drafts have not been very good, so he's got to do better in this one. And when you take the draft and take the decisions with Kirk Cousins, Hunter, and Justin Jefferson, there's just a whole lot that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has to get right in this offseason for the Vikings to stay in the hunt for an NFC North divisional championships, to stay in the hunt to make the playoffs, to be considered a contender for the NFC NFC conference title games and even the Super Bowl. And how successful he is in those four major decisions, is going to really determine whether the Vikings are a contender for the divisional title, and even better than that, or if they become just the fourth best team in the NFC North. So huge offseason for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Huge.
Well, and we're going to talk more about it as we go on, but yes, big time. This is going to be interesting. Now on to theme 2. This is a new segment.
It is. We call it "You Typed It," and
showing up. Great.
And we're calling it "You Typed It," and it's our way of, Dave and myself's way of acknowledging the viewer participation we get on this show week after week after week, and we thank you for it. All the comments we're seeing now and we see every week when we air the show, and we get a lot of great comments during the show. Dave does a great job of highlighting some of them, but a lot of times we can't address all of them because we've got so much of our own shit we're trying to talk about. We can't fit
through and select and all the other things. Yes.
We just can't fit it in, but but we do get some great comments and things that are great conversation points that we can jump off on when we get them. So what this segment is going to do is going to be regularly, we're going to take 2 or 3 comments from the previous week's show and bring them back on the following week's show and talk about them and discuss them as again a way and to thank the viewers for participating in our show, and also trying to answer some of those important questions that we've seen that have been thought-provoking and really sparked something. So going to hit it. And the first one is going to look at last week we had Drew. He's here again today, as is Reggie Adams. First time. I think Reggie's been with us. And thank him for showing up. Dave shamed him into coming in today. So that's
Reggie's been on some of our other shows.
But last week we had Drew, and we thank him. It was a great segment. A lot of the viewers really loved it. It was
awesome to have him back.
Talk college quarterbacks. So, and he, on his big board, he showed Bo Nix as his 4th overall guy, ahead of J.J. McCarthy, which must have. So that Drew is like legit in this when he doesn't pick the quarterback who plays for his favorite college team ahead of some other guy in his rankings. But that the ranking by Drew of having Nix higher than McCarthy and some others did spark a lot of comments, some for, some against. One of them was Jamie Cooker. I probably mispronounced that last name wrong, but my apologies. But Jamie said, "How is Nix ranked higher than J.J. McCarthy? I'm with Tyler Forno. He's a product of Oregon's first read system. He's going to be the Christian Ponder of this draft class." Well, pretty strong take there by Jamie, and I think that that comment was interesting to me because I feel that every year we get into the possibility of the Vikings picking a quarterback early in the first round, or early in the first round. That's the fear by Viking fans, that we're going to overdraft some guy there, and he's going to be a bust like Christian Ponder was.
Hey, the fan base is traumatized.
It is.
It was a shot that, Spielman took. He reached and he blew it.
So with Bo Nix, like Drew brought up lots of great points as to why he thinks that Bo Nix will succeed or can succeed at the NFL level. Our Tyler Fornes brought up lots of great points of why he thinks that Bo Nix will not succeed at the pro level. For me, I think really that, I've said it before. I don't watch a lot of college football. I've never watched a full Bo Nix game, and he's played 61 of them, so I've missed a lot of games. But I think when I look at this, I think that when you get the top three guys, all of the 6, 7 top quarterback prospects, they've got question marks about them. There doesn't seem to be a can't miss guy like a Peyton Manning or like an Andrew Luck that's out there. That even Caleb Williams and a lot of the concerns about him are above the neck, and they have nothing to do with his physical abilities. But particularly once you get past the top 3 prospects, Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, the second tier of the top of the big 6 or 7, the questions get even more, and there's more of them, and they're even more serious. And it does. So I am a bit nervous, like if the Vikings pick a quarterback at 11, they get one if they make the right guy. And I think that particularly if it's Bo Nix or Michael Penix that the Vikings decide to pick at 11, and I think both of those guys probably will be available then, I think there's going to be a lot of Viking fans who are going to be very upset with that decision. And they're going to think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah botched this very important quarterback of the future call.
And he very well may. It's tough. It is really, really tough because there is normally a GM's job is to find that quarterback, that franchise quarterback, and build a team around him and win games. If they don't, the result is being fired. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. You get fired. Right? Ask that guy, Rick Spielman. Now, Rick Spielman got 3 chances to do it, right? The first one was Ponder, and the Wilfs were kind enough to say, there's your mulligan. Because we all have that Ponder trauma now, but there's your mulligan. And the second shot was at Teddy. Well, Teddy gets his knee blown up. Well, all right, can't really count that. That was a fluke. Then he gets the third one, and the third one was bringing in Kirk Cousins. And after 3 years of Kirk Cousins, you're fired. He didn't achieve what he had set out to. Now, you have Kwesi coming in. He comes in and's got to do that competitive rebuild. The first year experiment, keep everybody so we know it was just Rick and Zim. And then the second year you can go on, but Kirk was under contract, so you got to keep him, and he can't move on, even though Kwesi may have wanted to find him, and from what was reported, he did, and he wanted to move up. So, does Kwesi get 3 chances? Probably not. I doubt it. People are starting to get really fed up with that. I doubt that's going to happen, but who knows? But his job is to find that quarterback. And that's why they hired KOC as well, to bring him in there and to find that quarterback. What happens in the next 2 months is going to determine whether Kwesi ends up on that hot seat or not, right? We're going through, we've got the combine this upcoming week. We have programming for that. We have the going into free agency. How is he going to work with free agency? We talked about at the beginning of the show. We have some free agent dollars to play with. How is he going to use that? How is he going to take old timer like Harrison Smith? Is he going to negotiate him to play for $7 million again? Down? Is he going to retire, or is he going to release him like on a post June 1st cut or something? How all this works in the next 2 months till we get through the draft is going to determine a lot of how Kwesi's going to be viewed. If the quarterback that comes in next is going to be basically what Kwesi decides. It's whether it's re-signing Kirk Cousins or going for a quarterback in the future or whatever. His decision, his career is basically on the line with what happens in the next 2 months. So, is his seat getting hot? I'm sure he's starting to feel the pressure because that's a lot. You got the whole franchise resting on your decisions. So, he's feeling it. And does he deserve to feel it? Oh, absolutely. That's what these guys sign up for. I want to be a GM. I want to feel all this pressure. I want to make sure I get all these, questions right. And everybody gets fired unless they're lucky enough to last long enough to retire. It's that simple. Even the great Bill Belichick, who ran the personnel over in New England for so long and won so many Super Bowls, he was released this year, right? So, and Vince Lombardi was released. It all happens. But to win, you've got to be able to find that guy. And that's what makes that GM position so important and so pivotal to what the success of a team. And we're going to find out. His seat could get real hot if he screws this up royally. So,
yeah, the Dennis had mentioned who does Kwesi Adofo-Mensah reach out to for help in the organization? I think Ryan Grigson is kind of his right hand man, right. Former Indianapolis Colts GM, and that would make I think that makes some Viking fans nervous because they didn't think he did a very good job with the Colts when he was their general manager. But that was the Colts. That was then. This is now. And you asked the question before, Dave, a couple of weeks ago about like how big of a say does Kevin O'Connell having this? It has to be a big one. If Kevin O'Connell is the quarterback guru that we assumed he was coming in as the head coach, then he knows what he's looking for in a quarterback. He knows what a good quarterback is, who isn't a good quarterback, who can play at the pro level, who can't, or at least in his opinion. So I think Kevin O'Connell and Ryan Gregson are going to be guys that are going to have a lot of say, along with Kwesi, on that quarterback call, whether it's Kirk Cousins or whether it's a college hotshot or both,
or a Bridge and some other college guy. This decision this year is what's going to make Kwesi's career most likely.
Yes,
it's not 100%, but most likely it will. If he re-signs Kirk Cousins and we go 2 more years of mediocrity, really, the fans are going to be turned off. We've seen that story. We've read that story. We've hashed that story out 4,000 million times, and it never changes. So if that happens, he'll get fired, right? If he fails and drafts somebody, say Bo Nix, and Tyler's correct and Bo Nix is nothing, he fails, he gets fired. If he finds somebody, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, whomever, and suddenly they hit it off big and we now are competitive for the next 10 years, he's going to be here that time. But he's got to hit that. If his plan is to re-sign Kirk better come back better than he ever was. If his plan is to get Bridge, he better find the right Bridge or convince everybody that we're going to suck a little bit this year, but that's okay because we're rebuilding. This is the plan. We're rebuilding the defense and we're doing this and that, right? And have people buy in. And he'll do all right, and then make sure that Bridge connects to the next franchise quarterback? And we'll get to that question here shortly. So
what Kwesi has to do what Nick Caserio did with the Texans last fall, when he picked C.J. Stroud. That basically is going to save Nick Caserio's job as general manager of the Texans, because C.J. Stroud looks like the next great quarterback, at least what I've seen. The guy's got it all.
Yep, and that's what these guys get when they apply for the job and get hired. Brian Poles in Chicago's dealing with not the exact same issues, but dealing with the similar issues in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryan Poles and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah are going to be attached at the hip because they're both hired at the same time. And Poles was interviewed here first, and it's all going to matter. So everything's under more of a magnifying glass than it ever was before. So it's going to be interesting. That brings us to the next question.
Yeah, comment. It follows on again. It was, as we talked about the quarterback position and college quarterbacks last week with Drew. We were talking about drafting the next franchise quarterback for the Vikings, and so Lorenzo Wright, who isn't here this week but was here last week, his question was, how long does a quarterback have to be with one team to be classified as a franchise quarterback? Kirk Cousins has been here for 6 years, probably not a seventh. Is he a franchise quarterback or not? So I think it's a good question. I think everybody's got a little bit of different take with little nuances here and there on what they consider a franchise quarterback to be. For me, a franchise quarterback has nothing to do with how long they have been with the team. It doesn't even have to do with what kind of stats they put up while they've been on that team. What it really has to do is, has that quarterback while he's been with that team, have they made the playoffs consistently? Have they competed for conference championships consistently? Have they maybe made the Super Bowl and won it? Or at least competed for that consistently? That is what I look at. And also within those games, how has that quarterback performed in those games and at critical times? Has he been the reason why we won those games, or not? And if your quarterback is answering those questions affirmatively, you've got a franchise quarterback. And that's why Kirk Cousins is not a franchise quarterback and is not considered a franchise quarterback by a lot of Viking fans, because he has made the playoffs 3 times with the 2 teams that he has played quarterback for. So he hasn't made the playoffs consistently. He's never been to a conference championship. He's never been to a Super Bowl. He puts up a lot. He's a very good player. He puts up lots of pretty stats at the end of the year, but he has not gotten his teams to the playoffs consistently. And when he's been there, he hasn't won consistently. So he's not a franchise quarterback. and I think it's as simple as that. And so, yeah, he's been here 6 years and he's played, pretty well at times. Has it been all his fault as to why the Vikings have not been a consistent, Super Bowl contender? No, but he's certainly part of that equation. And until he starts doing those things that Patrick Mahomes is doing, or Tom Brady did before him, he's not going to be considered a franchise quarterback. It's as simple as that.
Anthony says he'd rather have 2 good quarterbacks than none. Anthony, Kirk Cousins is good. Yeah. It hasn't gotten us anywhere. If you have none, at least you're getting the draft picks to select, hopefully, that franchise guy. And you can count them, how many of the Vikings had in their history. It's real simple. Yep. Tarkenton, Dante, you might throw Kramer in there, but
you might.
Dante. Who else? I mean, you could say Brett Favre, 2009. He had it. We had hoped Teddy would, but then he got his knee blown up. Dante got his knee blown up. So that never realized. You go back. Can't really, Brett Favre was a franchise quality quarterback, but he was at the end of his career. So the only one is Tarkenton, Sir Francis. That's it. Vikings have been around since 1961. They're older than I am by 2 years. Just good doesn't cut it. I'm sorry. Just good gives you mediocrity. Best of the worst and worst of the best, like Drew used to say. Yeah, is it fun? Yeah, it's fun watching games because we win some games. Is there a possibility of making the playoffs? Yeah, there's a possibility of making the playoffs. Cool, we make the playoffs. There's tons of family memories that have gone with that. I love that. But aren't you tired of the one and done? Even if you made it past the 2017. That was a magical season, but we got killed in the NFC Championship game. That was with a backup. Now, let's find that next franchise quarterback. We're overdue. Let's get him.
Mm-hmm.
And Giatano says, Dave, that's because they've never drafted a quarterback in the top 10. Giatano, you are 100% correct. They never have. In their entire history, they never have. And that could be the reason. It's harder when you get further down. Can you find guys at the end? Yeah. But they're rare, and they're the anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. That brings us to the next guy you were going to talk about, Justin Jefferson.
Well, this is the third comment I want to highlight. And last week we talked about Justin Jefferson extension was what was holding things up. Apparently, it's the disagreement and opinion between management and Justin's team on how much they want to guarantee him and for how long. And so we talked about that and the pros and cons to that. And Norpheus here today.
Norpheus is in the chat.
As always, as I was talking about, he said, said, yes, Darren, but no, and in caps, NO team has ever been built around a wide receiver that won a championship. Interesting comment, because I haven't really thought about that with this whole, should we, when are we going to re-sign Justin Jefferson? And I didn't look at the history to kind of see if there has been a team that's won a Super Bowl that's been built around a wide receiver, and what do you consider being built around a wide receiver might differ between what I think and what somebody else thinks. But certainly it didn't happen from the beginning of the Super Bowl era in the late 1960s until the late 1980s, because the game was different then, the rules were different then, passing was not really
the primary focus. Primary focus was finding the guy that could pound the rock.
Yeah, that's right. The running game.
And so running backs were taken in the top 5. Everybody was looking for that big running back.
They were. But since that time, the passing game has become much more of a focus, and the rules have changed. And wide receiver, as a result, wide receivers have become an impact position. There's quarterback, defensive end, edge rusher, and wide receiver now. Those are I think the marquee positions, and probably in that order. But it's still interesting question. I think that the thing about wide receivers, of course, is that they can't throw the ball to themselves. So, quarterback's the most important position in sports. So, every NFL team, I think, is always going to build around the quarterback, or probably should have. If you look at, people are going to point to the Patrick Mahomes Kansas City Chiefs situation now lately, because they got rid of Tyreek Hill and have won 2 straight Super Bowls since they got rid of Tyreek Hill. With Travis Kelce and not a whole lot else for Pat Mahomes to throw to.
And that's why finding that guy, and Patrick Mahomes is a surefire Hall of Famer. He's going to be a legend. Probably he could beat Brady's records and be the GOAT. It's just, he's that good that he can make up for it. But he did have Travis Kelce. Before that, obviously, Tyreek Hill. So you have to have some good receivers. If you look at everybody that won the Super Bowl, they had some good receivers on their team.
Yeah, and it's been pointed out in our chat below. Like it's Jerry Rice. Aglel has pointed that out. Or Fitzgerald. Drew talked about the Vikings kind of built around Randy Moss. Of course, didn't make the Super Bowl. But, despite all this talk. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But all this talk, I have been surprised the past couple of weeks by how many Viking fans seem to be on board now with the whole JJ's getting too expensive, let's trade him. I have been surprised by that because he's doing things that haven't been done by a wide receiver before. We get a few comments recently by a couple of people about that Justin Jefferson is overrated, which seems pretty hard. That's quite a hot take.
Set records every year he's been in the NFL so far. That blows my mind. The best wide receiver in the NFL ever is his rookie year. Best wide receiver ever in the NFL his second year. Best wide receiver in the NFL ever his third year. All right, so he's the Pat Mahomes of wide receivers.
Yes. I just feel that there's got to be a way that a medium where the Vikings, Justin Jefferson gets what he wants contract-wise, and the Vikings get what they want where they sign him to a legitimate, fair deal, but it doesn't hamstring them so that they can't build the roster to competing for playoff positions and Super Bowls. There's got to be a way to do both. And I think that, so I don't think that you build specifically around Justin Jefferson, but he's got to be, when he's that good, he's got to be a big part of your foundation. Yeah, he's got to be a big part of your foundation. And there's got to be a way to make that happen. And maybe some people below are going to say, yeah, you re-sign Justin Jefferson and you get a rookie QB on a rookie contract and go from there. So
now the positions you want, the key ones that you want to build up is obviously you want the quarterback, the franchise quarterback, the one we haven't had, long-term since Francis Tarkenton. You want that guy. You need good guys to throw him to him. The receivers. You need at least one good wide receiver, right? Even back then, he had Gene Washington. You could list who Fran had to throw to. You need a good pair of tackles, or at least a left tackle, generally. And you need on the defensive side somebody that can rush the passer, right? Again, we've switched away from running the rock is the primary thing, where you needed that big, massive back. That era actually ended with Adrian Peterson. We've gotten beyond that to now where the primary threat, besides the quarterback, is the wide receiver. So you get the wide receiver. It's like saying, hey, I've got Earl Campbell. Now let's trade Earl Campbell because we need to get a quarterback. You can't build a team around Earl Campbell. Well, he was the main number one weapon for the Oilers. You did that. You had... Take Dallas back when they were winning games. They had the triplets, right? So you had the wide receivers, the running back, the quarterback. You've got to have a mixture of all those. And if you have the best at one of those positions, that just helps it all. And with Jerry Rice, he was the best at wide receiver when they transitioned from Montana to Young, right? They got lucky, and Young was the next Hall of Fame quarterback. But was that all Young's D-Leagues, or was that him having Jerry Rice and the rest of the surrounding cast that on San Francisco that was so good that helped make him and groom him to be the Hall of Fame quarterback that he was? And I would say that was the case. Just like when Randy Moss went from Oakland, where he didn't play worth a shit, to New England, and holy shit, that offense took off. They had, 50-plus touchdowns that season? They went undefeated all the way until they hit their nemesis in the New York Giants. That was amazing, right? Was New England winning games before that? Yeah. But did they go 17-0, 19-0 before that? No. That was Randy Moss. And he caught, 30-some-odd passes or touchdowns that year? That was unbelievable. People are trying, Sarah, people are trying to compare the Chiefs and the Patriots. Didn't need elite wide receivers. Remind me again why Mahomes or Brady. Hey, they both have had elite wide receivers at different times in their careers, and it's helped them. And it helps a growing elite quarterback to have them. And if we're going to the quarterback of the future, that rookie guy, he needs somebody he can throw to. And if you have an elite guy, he can help that development, just like with Brady, just like with Mahomes. That's what I'm getting at. I think it'd be foolish to get rid of him, even if he wants $150 million over 5 years or whatever the number is.
Speaking of getting rid of, there's been a few comments about Brian O'Neill and trading him, which is interesting. And I didn't talk about that when we went offensive line like over a month ago and looked at the Vikings positional analysis. I know what Drew Bunting would feel about that. And like he said before, don't mess with the tackles on the offensive line, right? It took us so long to find two good tackles. I don't think O'Neill was overrated. And I think last year his drop in play was that he was playing hurt. I think he had like a broken foot or something like that late in the year. And he hit some poor games late in the year. But for the most part, Julie liking us there. I did think a bit about what would be, what could you get for Brian O'Neill? He's been hurt the past couple of years late in the year. He's in his late 20s. He's been extremely durable, but the past 2 years, maybe not so much. But again, the question becomes, who do you replace him with? True. We don't have any, obviously, who could step right in and give you Brian O'Neill kind of production along the Vikings offensive line. And I think if you're going with a rookie quarterback, you want
somebody there that can help.
You need some tackles who can protect him.
You need some tackles. You need some receiving threats. You need the whole thing. Dr. Proder, how much did Dante benefit from having Chris Carter? I'd say a huge amount. Chris Carter was the security blanket. All Dante had to do was throw it to the sideline. Chris is going to catch it. That was huge. And it's huge for the building of the mentality, the confidence levels. To have being able, I can trust these guys. I can throw it and not be exactly on target, and they're going to catch it. Right? That's huge for a quarterback. It's not going, it's got to be perfect. He's got to be 3 steps ahead of the defender. I'm not going to throw the ball. Right? That sounds like somebody we know. No. Throw it. Kirk Cousins played better because he learned to trust Justin Jefferson. Hey, I can throw it there, and Justin's going to come down with it. It doesn't matter if he's double or triple team. He's coming down with it. I'm going to throw it there. And 9 out of 10 times he did. And that built Kirk's confidence. And I admit, Kirk played his best ball under KOC. But part of that was because he had Justin Jefferson. Hey, before he had Diggs, he had Thielen. And then all the excuses, well, there's nothing else. He didn't have the confidence in Diggs and Thielen, though. He didn't start throwing into coverage until under KOC. So, not confidently, and that's where the advantage of having Justin Jefferson is there. That's why you want to build, quote, Norsefius, want to build around him with that next quarterback. Hey, if he gets past the next contract, then you can talk trading and doing whatever, because he's going to want $200 million or whatever it is. Then we could debate then. But until then, till we have that next quarterback, as long as JJ is the one that's giving these quarterbacks confidence, I want him on the team. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Pink, Brett Favre made Sidney Rice look like a Pro Bowler. Yep.
Not only looked like one, he was one.
He was one. Yep. Yeah. But Brett Favre needed some good wide receivers up in Green Bay for him to develop. He didn't have him in Atlanta. That's one of the reasons they traded him. So, anyways, all right. Now on to theme 3. Hopefully that answered your question, Morpheus. All right. Outside linebackers.
Yeah, latest in our positional analysis of the Vikings, edge, outside linebacker. I was debating combining outside and inside linebacker, but they really are two different positions in the 3-4. So, and do completely different things. So decided to break them up. Outside linebacker is going to get at that today. Here we go, Dave. Here are the outside linebackers under contract as of today for the Minnesota Vikings.
Well, I'm showing the three that are not.
Yeah. Here are the ones that are: Pat Jones II, Andre Carter II. The end.
That's it.
That's it. So clearly the Vikings have some work to do to round out the outside linebacker room for 2024. If those are your only two guys under contract right now. Marcus Davenport and Danielle Hunter have void years in 2024, so they are free agents now. And DJ Wanham played out his
as of the 13th at 3 o'clock.
As of the 13th, unless something happens. And DJ Wanham played out his rookie contract, or is about to play out his rookie contract, his 4-year rookie contract. So he's set to be a free agent when free agency starts on March 13th as well. So what do you do here? Vikings have Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has a lot of work to do here to get this unit rounding into form, especially because outside linebacker in a 3-4, those are your primary pass rushers. So you better have some guys that can get after it there, or else your pass rush is not going to be very good. So what do you do? Well, number one, and I think that this is going to be something that's going to be debated amongst all the people we've got viewing here right now, is I think number one is re-sign Danielle Hunter. Yes, I know that he's going to turn 30 October 29th of 2024. Yes, I know you're not getting in the ground floor with him because he just had a career in sacks, so he's going to get mucho dinero, I think, when he hits free agency, even at his age. But why do I want the Vikings to re-sign Danielle Hunter? Because I think even when he turns 30 in late October, Dave, that does not mean that he, unlike some other positions, that does not mean for an edge rusher that you no longer fall off the cliff and can no longer play. You know, look at Khalil Mack last year at 32 years of age, 17 sacks. I look at Brandon Graham, 34 years old in 2022. He had a career high 11 sacks. Leonard Floyd, as a 30-year-old, he had 9.5 sacks with the Rams. And then last year, he had 10.5 as a 31-year-old with the Buffalo Bills. So there's lots of examples out there of edge rushers 30 years or older who can still get after the quarterback and be productive pass rushers. And with Danielle Hunter, he's been incredibly consistent as a Viking. In 5 of his last 7 years, he's had over 10 sacks. And one of those years that he didn't, he only played 7 games. And he thrived in the Brian Flores system last year. And he's been a guy that you know what you're going to get with him.
Anthony hit that up right there.
Yeah, you know what you're going to get with him. The Vikings have seen it year in and year out. I think that you can sign him for a 3-year deal, takes him into age 32, and you can. Health is always going to be a concern with a guy that's 30. They get nicked up more, maybe miss a few more games. But he's 2 years past his last serious injury, which I think the pec and the neck thing were freak injuries. They have not proven to be an issue since then. So I think that you can look at him and be reasonably confident that as long as he's healthy, you're going to get a productive pass rusher, just as productive as anybody who is out there available in free agency right now. So I would have no problem re-signing him, especially as I expect when you don't bring back Kirk Cousins and you've got more cap space because the cap has gone up. You have the scratch to re-sign Danielle Hunter and sign him to a contract that doesn't kill you financially, but makes him happy. So I think that's the first thing the Vikings got to do, and that solves one of your edge rushing problems right there. You've got Danielle Hunter back, locked and loaded as a 29-year-old, soon to be turned 30. But what are you going to do on the other side?
Right. Well, on the age thing, I explained last week, over the cap, some of the folks there did a research project on back in 2017 about what's the death age in the NFL. Because it applies to contracts. Most everybody coming off their first contract's 28 years old-ish is on the average. And that's about where production starts falling off for everybody. And almost every position, right, is that 28 to 30 range. Once you're 30, you're ancient, right? All except for a few positions. Quarterback, makes sense. They're not taking the physical abuse that, say, a running back is. They usually last longer, and that decline age is usually right around 35, and Kirk is 36. And then they look at O-line tend to last longer, as well as, I'm trying to remember the other positions. Obviously, throughout the specialists, because they go till they're almost in the old folks' home. But but edge rushers, your pass rushers, usually last into their mid-30s and are still productive. Now, we watch take Von Miller as a case study. Von Miller has been in this league how many years? It seems like forever. He went to the Bills this last year. He suffered an injury, and he never came back. He was never his full self and never did it. But I think Von Miller is over 35. But up until this year, he was producing. Yeah. So if we give Danielle a 3-year deal, I think we lose nothing. I don't think his production slips. I think he would still be guaranteed at least minimum 10 sacks, getting a whole bunch of pressures, if not more. And I think that's why keeping him. And we don't have the edge rushers. We told you. There's two under contract, and one's an undrafted free agent, and the other one's a late-round draft pick. We haven't selected an edge rusher high since what? Early Spielman? It's been forever.
Yeah, certainly in the first round. Like
Hunter was the third round, and that was early Spielman. And then before that,
the only defensive end we've selected in the first round in 20 years. Sharif Floyd was selected in the first round, as somebody pointed out a few months ago. He was a defensive tackle, but I think that Hunter is a guy that I think the Vikings should re-sign him. He's the best free agent edge rusher out there, and you've had him his whole entire career, and he's still going to be productive for the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to cost you, but they're all going to cost you some. And you've got extra cap space now. Let's go for it. Solves one of your problems on the outside linebacker. What do you do about the other side? You can't go with, as you just mentioned, you can't go with Pat Jones or Andre Carter as your guy opposite Danielle Hunter if you were signing, because Pat Jones has never done anything in 3 years as a pro. I don't see how that's going to change in 2024. And he came off, I think, a pretty bad season last year when he had the most snaps he's ever had as a pro. Andre Carter II, he was a project when you signed him as an undrafted rookie free agent. He's still a project now. I think the best you can hope for him is that this year he progresses to a place where he can be a rotational guy, giving your starters a rest and maybe playing 15, 20 snaps a game, every game. I think that's the best case scenario. Hey, Calais Campbell, love that guy. What about DJ Wanham? Well, I said last week that DJ was playing the best football of his career, I thought, until he hurt his quad. But now you got the quad injury he's got to come back for. Also, though, he's always been just an okay player, not a good player, not a great player. I wouldn't be against bringing him back at a reasonable amount, but I think that he's going to go elsewhere. I think the Vikings are going to look for an upgrade opposite Danielle Hunter and look for somebody with more pass rushing juice than what DJ Wanham can give you. And then Davenport, talked about him earlier. Still a possibility, being as his void date has been moved to March the 13th. I wouldn't re-sign him for all the reasons I already stated early in the show. Always injured. How motivated is he to actually be a football player? That's a question I have after what I saw this year. Again, good player when he plays, but doesn't play enough. And
Hey,
But again, if you can get Marcus Davenport, look at what we have on right now under contract or on the free agency side of things. If you can get Davenport on a 1 year, prove it, like 2 or 3 million
that's what I was
type
going to say.
then maybe Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, considering that maybe Davenport is not looked at badly in the locker room, and I don't think he must be, because they've decided that they want to give an extra couple of weeks to work something out if they can with him. Again, he's a good player when he plays at a very cheap, dirt cheap deal with the little amount of players we have right now at outside linebacker. Maybe you bring him back and you give him an opportunity to compete for a starting job, and also you don't eat that dead cap space with him if you're able to sign him, which is the same thing with Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter has $7.4 million as dead cap space that you could spread out if you re-sign him. So there's some options there. Free agency wise, outside of those guys, there's several like enticing options right now that could be would be a nice guy to pair with Danielle Hunter potentially. You got Josh Allen from the Jaguars, Brian Burns from the Panthers, maybe even Bryce Huff from the Jets. Chase Young is set to be a free agent. Well, at least all these guys are set to hit the market. I don't know how many of them will hit the market, Dave. I think that, Josh Allen.
Some may get tags.
Yeah, like Allen, Burns, maybe even Bryce Huff, potentially re-signed by their own teams or getting tagged. Chase Young is an interesting guy because he's been a 4.3 all his career, and he's never lived up to that number 2 overall draft position that he was picked at. But we saw that Danielle Hunter transitioned pretty well. Took a little while, but transitioned pretty well from being a 4.3, hand in the dirt end to a 3-4 stand-up linebacker. I think Chase Young could do the same thing. The only thing is that I think that he's not even 25 yet, Dave, so he's going to have a lot of interest on the market, even if he has never lived up to the expectations yet and he's had some injury issues. So I don't think that after you re-sign Hunter, I don't think that the Vikings would quite be willing to invest another large amount on another edge rusher like Young. However, what about Andrew Van Ginkel from the Miami Dolphins? Interesting player. People will look at him. He's not nearly as young as Chase Young. He's 28 right now. He'll turn 29, I think, at some point next season. But and I put this in parentheses, only 6 sacks last year. But when I watched the Dolphins play, man, this guy was all over the field making plays. And I like him as a player. He's got to tie into Flores and Flores' times there. And I think that he's a guy that is not going to break the bank to re-sign. I think that he would be a great value signing for the Vikings, and he would fit in quite well in the Brian Flores defense, especially opposite Drew Bunting. So he'd be a guy I'd be looking very seriously at re-signing if I could in free agency. That's your free agency side of things. Draft-wise, you talked about it earlier, Dave. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. It's time, I think, to look seriously at drafting some edge rushers. We didn't draft any edge rushers in 2022. We didn't in 2023. So the cupboard is getting pretty bare there, and we need to restock the shelves.
This could be undrafted free agent, but to keep him from his Army service for a little while. Yeah.
I think this is the year to do it. A lot's going to depend on what we do with that number 11 overall pick. If we trade up, we're taking a quarterback, or if we take a quarterback at all in the first round, well, then edge rusher isn't going to be happening in the first round. But if we do not pick a quarterback in the first round, then I think Leteo Latu from UCLA would be a nice addition in the first round for us.
If he gets cleared on his medicals, I agree. Mm-hmm. The dude has 8 different counters already. Most good pros don't have that many counters. By what I mean is counters is when a defensive end edge rusher is coming in, he's got steps and he's looking and he's doing reads, and there's specific amounts, and it's all committed to his subconscious. But when that tackle or whoever he's up against makes his move, goes to punch him or to do whatever, if he defeats his whatever Latu's first plan is, whether it be to power or to bend or to rip or to swim or whatever it is, he's got, all right, now that he's hit me here, I know I need to swipe that away and do this. And this guy's already got that down. Most defensive ends, even in the league, don't have that many. And that's why everybody's so high on him, except for his neck injury. And that's why he's got to clear medicals first.
Yeah, and that's going to be important. That also could be, say the Vikings don't go quarterback in the first round, they don't trade up, and they've still got at 11. That could drop him down a little bit and allow the Vikings to get him, but also trade down and gather more draft picks. Just a hypothetical, but Latu is a guy that would be very interesting to me. I know that there's obviously Dallas Turner from Alabama. A lot of people are going to talk about. Tyler Forness does not like him. Jared Verse, I think Tyler Forno was a milkworm, a lukewarm on Verse as well. But those are guys that have been linked to the Vikings. Those are probably the top
two edge rushers.
Yeah, for sure. And they've been linked to the Vikings in various mock drafts and their possibilities as well. But they've got question marks on them, just as Latu does. But if the Vikings don't pick an edge rusher in the first round, then I think in the second round they would definitely have to go after it, assuming they don't trade away the second rounder to move up and get a quarterback. But assuming they don't do that and they have that second rounder, they didn't pick an edge rusher in the first round. I think they've got to go edge rusher in the second round. And some guys that should be there at that time would be Penn State's Chop Robinson. Got a picture of him.
Which is iffy because his draft stocks tends to move up. He's moving up, and we'll find out more over this next week and a half as they go through the combine. If they do something outstanding and Chop Robinson ran a 4.340 and he's a defensive end, his stock's going to go sky high, right? Stuff like that. He jumped 44 inches. Wow. Height-wise. He cleared, broad jump 11 feet. They're going to go nuts. He's got 35-inch arms, right? He can scratch his kneecaps. Oh, wow. We want that. All that sort of stuff happens this next week.
Yes. And we don't know which guys are going to slide, move way up or down. Chop Robinson, I think, only had 4 sacks last year, though. So people are going to question, great measurables, but where's the production? A guy who did have better production than him was his teammate, Adisa Isaac, and he's another guy who'd be, is looking like he'll be available in the second round, and somebody I would target if I were the Vikings in the second round. Chris Braswell from Alabama, another guy, super athletic, not as maybe productive as Dallas Turner, but in the second round, he would look very nice. So those are guys early that we could target. But I think also, along with targeting an edge rusher early, because we need to stock those cupboards at edge rusher, I think the Vikings also need to look on day 2 from the 4th round, 5th round, 6th round, 7th round. They need to get another guy to add depth and go for a pass rusher with potential, maybe a little bit undersized and overlooked by NFL scouts. And this class of edge rusher seems to have a lot of guys like that, like Austin Booker from Kansas. Another guy that's kind of undersized, and you hear about Javon Solomon from Troy University. I think Troy University is where DeMarcus Ware went to school. And then Mo Camara from Colorado State. These are all guys that aren't super big, but have been very productive as pass rushers in the past year, and would be available 5th round, 4th round, 5th round, 6th round, that sort of area. The Vikings have 2 picks in each of those rounds right now. So, and I think the Vikings need to look at getting a couple of edge rushers in this draft, and early and then late. And late, these are some guys, along with a bunch of others, these are some guys that would interest me and might interest the Vikings too. Some of them were at the Senior Bowl, some of them weren't. And again, some of these guys are going to rise and fall based on what they do in the combine and their pro days and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of work for the Vikings to do at edge, I think, and they got to address it in free agency by signing one of their own, Danielle Hunter, and they got to address it in the draft by targeting edge early and late in 2024.
Yep, without a doubt. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. I want to thank everybody that's been watching. We've had a great showing today. Norsefius calls it the Jockstrap Carousel, what's going to happen this week? And speaking of what's going to happen this week, as you all know, the NFL Combine officially starts tomorrow. Actually, today, early players can start arriving. They won't hit the field till Thursday, I think it is. But they're doing interviews and their medical checks and their ortho checks, and if they're taking tests and all that sort of stuff happens earlier in the week, and they stage them by position groups, and they start running them through this process. That starts officially tomorrow. Some players are getting there early. The teams are getting there early, as in today or tomorrow, if they're not there already. Over here on Vikings First and SKOL, we have shows planned for you already. Tomorrow night will be the Real Forno show as normal. Tuesday, we're going to be focusing on cornerbacks this week on the SKOL Search series. So you're going to get some corners because that's something we could actually use. I know I'm tired of taking them high, but we could actually use a good corner or two. And then once we start getting through what's happening at the Combine through, whether it be Kwesi's conference or KOC's talking to the press, and then once they get on the field, we're going to be doing stuff most likely later in the evening, recapping what happened during the day and if it applies to your Minnesota Vikings. So stay subscribed, hit that notification bell, hit it for all so that you can see when the shows pop up. We try to give you at least an hour's worth of notice to say, hey, we're coming on and join us. It's going to be a fun and busy week, but hey, it's hope season. We're looking at these guys and going, he'd be great in purple, right? That's what I want. I know you two too, as we hopefully Kwesi Adofo-Mensah makes the right choices this offseason, and we eventually make it to the promised land that none of us have seen. And I haven't seen us even there since 1976. So that's what it is. Any last words, Darren?
Just going to follow up on and encourage folks to check in on all of our content during the Combine. This is a very people are making fun about the underwear Olympics and that sort of thing, but it's still it's a big part of the news cycle in the NFL, and First and SKOL is going to be hitting it hard this week, so stay tuned. I'm really going to be. There probably won't be a lot that'll actually come out of it, but I am going to be interested to see what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell say. What are the messages that they're putting out there during their press availability this week? I just find it fascinating to try to read between the lines try to okay, out of all this BS and baffle gab, what are they actually telling me?
Well, like Ted doing the old Zimzu.
Yes.
Translations. Yes. I fully expect that Darren tends to prep the topics for the week, and then he makes the notes and I make the graphics, and I fully expect to see the conferences, whether it be Kwesi's and KOC's, both be part of next week's show. So make sure you stay tuned.
Other than that, thanks everybody for showing up. It was a great participation today once again. So really, again, can't thank you enough for how spending part of your Sunday with me and Dave here. We really appreciate it. And yeah, hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. And also, SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!